Hello students, today we will be learning more about marriage and death sanskars of Hindu practices. The things which you will be learning in this topic are introduction to marriage sanskars, significance for marriage for men, women and society, types of marriage, marriage ceremonies, conception of death in Hinduism, death sanskars and summary. Let's start with marriage and the marriage sanskars in Hinduism. Till this point, we have gained detailed knowledge about the meaning, purpose and different types of sanskars. One of the most important sanskars in Hindu tradition is the Vivaha sanskar, the sacred institution of marriage, which we will discuss in detail. Because of the great importance attached to the married couples and their roles within society, Vivaha is considered the most important sanskars undertaken by individuals. According to the Vedic vision, life was ideally divided into 4 stages of development known as ashramas. The first began with the initiation ceremony and was known as the stage of brahmacharya, or life dedicated to learning spiritual truths. Thereafter came the householder or the grihastha, the retiree, the vanaprastha, and finally the renunciate, the sannyas. Manu enjoins, having spent the first quarter of one's life in the Guru's house, the second quarter in one's own house and with the wife, and the third quarter in the forest, one should take sannyas in the fourth, casting away every worldly tie. Vivaha, translated as marriage, means the assumption of specific burdens. It is the most important of all the Hindu sanskars. It refers to the supporting and sustaining of dharma, which is the householder learned during his years in the first ashram of brahmachari. The householder was the most exalted stage in Vedic society because the householder constitutes the foundation of society. The Smrutis laud the grihastha ashram at the highest, for it is the central support of the other 3 ashrams. It is the management of resources by the householders which contribute to the welfare of the society as well as the environment. By marriage, an individual is able to achieve the 4 purusharths or the endeavors of life: dharma, righteousness; arth, wealth; kam, desire; and moksha, salvation. Procreation for children is also a primary purpose of marriage. The individual is also able to pay off ancestral debts by having children. The householder thus fulfills in the mundane world of the function of Mahavishnu, the preserver of the Hindu Trinity. During the nuptial rites, the groom is treated as the Mahavishnu himself and the bride is regarded as Mahalakshmi. The emphasis in a Hindu marriage is the performance of one's duties. The householder has a duty or the dharma to ply himself to legitimately acquire wealth in order to himself enjoy, to practice dharma and to support students, retirees and renunciates. Let's discuss what is the significance for marriage for men, women and society. In addition to being a religious sacrament, Hindu marriage is also regarded as an important social institution. In many ways, marriage symbolizes the beginning of social life for both men and women. For women, it also enables their participation in religious matters. The importance of marriage for women is parallel in Hindu literature. Unmarried goddesses are often portrayed as dangerous and uncontrollable, as in the case of Mariamman, the fever goddess, reinforcing beliefs surrounding the inauspiciousness of unmarried, divorced or widowed women. Comparatively, in the epic Ramayana, the hero Ram and his wife Sita represent an idealization of marriage that is upheld for Hindu couples to aspire for. Marriage is of near equal importance for men. With few exceptions, males cannot perform sacrificial offerings without a wife, and marriage is seen as necessary to live in accordance with dharma. This importance is likewise symbolized within Hindu religious mythology. And unmarried gods may be depicted as powerless. For example, in one of the representations, the god Shiva is a corpse until his marriage to Shakti animates him. For developing a stable and ideal society, marriage has been regarded as an essential element in all cultures of the world. A society without loyal marital ties tend to degrade. It is said that promiscuity was one reason for the downfall of the Romans. By marriage, both an individual and society, while remaining within the moral norms, can progress together. Simultaneously, it does not cause harm to others nor infringe upon one's independence. This sanskars boost the cultural values and dharma. It upholds and promotes moral righteousness and self-control. Let us now discuss what are the different types of marriage which have been there in the Hindu tradition. In the Hindu scriptures, there are 8 types of marriage which are being mentioned. In the Manu Smriti, they are divided into 2 groups basically, the morally approved or the prashast and the disapproved or the aprashast. Let's discuss the prashast first. Now the prashast has been further divided into a number of types. The first is the Braham. This is the purest type. It was so called because it was thought fit for Brahmins. In this, the girl is given by the father with such ornaments that he can afford to a man of character and learning, whom he has invited voluntarily and received respectfully, without taking anything in exchange. The Smritis consider this type as the most honorable, as it is free from physical force, lust, imposition of conditions and lure of money. Social decency and religious considerations are fully taken into account. The second type under prashast is the Deva. This is the next type, inferior to the Brahm. In this, the girl is ornamented and given away by the father to a priest who officiates a yagna or sacrifice. It is called Deva, since the gift is made on the occasion of a Dev Yagna. This method was prevalent among the first 3 Hindu classes. This type has faded, for it is considered improper to offer a girl to a priest. The next is the Arsh. In this method, the father of the bride received a pair of 2 kinds of kine, a cow and an ox, or 2 cows and 2 oxen, from the bridegroom for the purpose of a yagna, which formed a part of a religious ritual. The pair of kine was not the bride's price. The method was known as Arsh because it was prevalent among the priestly families. Nonetheless, according to the Manu Smriti, accepting a gift, small or large, amounts to a sale. The next is the Prajapatya. This involved the father giving away his daughter to a suitor with a specific understanding that they both perform their civic and religious duties together. The name Prajapatya suggests that the couple enter the bond for discharging their duties to Prajapati, that is, for procreating and raising children. From the Western point of view, this type of marriage may be regarded satisfactory because the rights of the husband and wife are equally well secured. But from the point of view of Hindu Shastras, it is inferior to the first 3. This is because the daughter is given subject to mundane conditions. Hence, the gift cannot truly be regarded as free. As a point of interest, Kautilya in his Arthashastra prohibited divorce for the 4 Purusharth, the Prashast marriages. As a point of interest, Kautilya in his Arthashastra prohibited divorce for the 4 Prashast marriages. Now we shall consider the 4 types of marriage which are not approved by the scriptures. These are called aprashast. The first kind among this is the asur. The Manu Smriti defines this as where the husband, having paid money to the relations of the bride, and the bride herself accepts her out of a free will. The main consideration in this kind of marriage is money, and it is in reality a purchase. Manu condemns it. He says The learned father of the girl should not accept even the least amount of price. Accepting the price out of greed, he becomes the seller of the children. The Atre Brahmana branch is type of Pashu Vivaha, animal marriage. Today, this form of marriage is still prevalent in certain sections of Hindu society, where a dowry is demanded from the bride's father. Public opinion has begun to frown upon dowry. Religious and social leaders have been rallying against it. This brings us to another type of marriage that's called Gandharva. According to Manu, where the bride and bridegroom meet each other of their own accord and the union is consummated in passion, that form is called Gandharva. The name Gandharv is derived from a tribe of that name living in the Himalayas, in which it was a common occurrence. It was more prevalent among the Kshatriyas as they represented the freest element in society. The majority of the lawgivers discouraged it on religious and moral grounds. It was regarded as inferior to the first 5 forms because it was performed without sacred rituals and it originated from passion, a factor which seemed to be tenuous. The next was the Rakshas. Manu says capture of a girl by force while she is crying, having killed, scattered and injured her relatives is called Rakshas Vivaha. This usually occurred during war or political upheavals. The Kshatriyas usually practiced this since they participated in war and obtained women as war booties. The word Rakshasa means demonic. Next is Pishach. This is the least approved. Manu defines this as cohabiting with a girl in loneliness when she is sleeping, mad or intoxicated. Obviously, this was the most uncivilized and barbaric method. Pishach means of witches. Now we will discuss the ceremonies and associated rituals of Hindu marriage. The actual wedding ceremony varies considerably from place to place. However, one of the authors, Sharma, outlines 6 rites commonly observed. The first is Madhuparka, in which the groom and his party arrive at the bride's house, traditionally on a horseback. They are received by the bride's family and the groom is honored as a deity. The second element is that of Kanyadan. This is where the father gives his daughter to the groom and the couple lights a fire in the sacrificial pit. During Panigrahana, the groom takes the bride by the hand and presents her with a Mangal Sutra or pendant that is tied around her neck. Rodericks describes this pendant to be similar in nature to the Yagyopavid that is given to twice born males at their Upnayan ceremony. Following the ritual of Panigrahana, the bride steps on the north stone by sacrificial fire. This is known as Asmarohana and symbolizes the couple's strength against their enemies. During Asmarohana, the bride throws 3 oblations of rice into the fire, which is called Laj Homa. The final rite during the wedding ceremony is considered the most important and is what legally seals the marriage. This is called the Saptapadi. The bride and groom circle the sacred fire 7 times with corners of their garments tied together, also known as the 7 steps. Each step symbolizes a different aspect of the marriage, such as friendship, wealth, and fertility. By taking the 7th and final step, the marriage is made official. After completion of the ceremonies, there is typically a celebration held that includes dancing, singing, and feasting. Varagraha Prasthana marks the bride's departure from her family's home to her husband's, where she will remain during the course of her marriage under her in-laws' care. Consummation of the marriage does not take place until 3 days after the marriage ceremony and is known as Katurthi Karma. As India has a rich and diverse cultural heritage, the actual ceremonies and rituals vary from one subculture to the other. At some places in India, particularly the South India, the ceremonies are more elaborate. Now in the next section we will look at the 16th sanskar, which is the death sanskar, which includes the beliefs related to death and the death rites. It is important to understand that how death is conceptualized in Hinduism. Death in Hinduism is not seen as a dreadful necessity, but as the greatest opportunity for liberating oneself from this sansar, the cycle of rebirth. According to sage Bodhyana, the sanskars performed while alive help one conquer the earth, and that performed at death helps one conquer heaven. Life and death constitutes a continuous process. The concept of reincarnation is the basis of Hinduism. Death is not seen as an end, but merely another stage on the seemingly endless road to self-realization and unification with the divine. The body is a mere vehicle to carry the consciousness. Death and cremation are the processes that allow the spirit from the dead body to leave this world and enter the ancestral realm. Basically, with few exceptions, the Hindu rites at the time of death and the procedures for cremation are fairly uniform throughout the regions of India. This conformity in rituals across Vedic, epic, Puranic and Agamic periods and on into modern practice is remarkable. Now we will also learn about the death sanskars, the different type of death sanskars, from dying stage to the Shraddh stage. The first is while the person is dying. When a person ascertains that he or she is about to die, the priests are invited and worship is offered to the family deity or to Lord Vishnu through the Shalagram stone. The dying one prays for forgiveness for all the sins committed during the lifetime. If he or she is incapable, the eldest son performs the rite of the absolution on their behalf and charity is given to the poor. The dying person is also transformed from the bed to the floor. There are two reasons for this. First of all, it facilitates in the process of chanting and the rites which are being performed, since the Brahmins themselves are seated on the floor, and also to help the dying person to die with as much awareness as possible. Secondly, the bed would have to be discarded if someone was allowed to die in it. All weeping is discouraged because this affects the consciousness of the dying person and causes feelings of attachment and guilt to rise. Thereafter, the sacred water and tulsi leaf are then administered to the dying person, and the priest and the family members begin the chanting of the hymn of the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu. It's also called Vishnu Sahasranam Strotam. The idea is that the thought which occupies the mind at the time of death conditions the future birth. If one dies concentrating on the Supreme Lord, then liberation will be obtained. During these days of mourning, it is customary to arrange for the daily reading of the Garud Puran, which deals with the subject of death and rebirth and experiences in the afterlife. Now I will read about the Antyeshti or the death rites. Antyeshti or cremation is the main ritual for disposing of a body in Hinduism and the final sanskar in the Hindu's life. Cremation of the dead is considered as sanskar because it is changing the state of the person from one realm to another. It is viewed as a medium between life and the ancestral realm. Yajurved regards Vivaha as the 16th sanskar, while Rigved considers Antyeshti. Though performed after the death of a person by his relatives, it is of importance because the value of the next world is higher than that of the present. The final rituals are performed with meticulous care with the help of Brahmin priest. The first ritual after death is to place a few tulsi leaves and few drops of Ganga water in the mouth of the dead person. It is then laid on the floor, which has been purified by applying the sacred cow dung. The old clothes are removed and the body is bathed with sanctified water. The body is then covered with one piece of new, uncut cloth, which is also called kafan. It is then laid on a bier made of bamboo canes tied with jute strings. The family members then take the body to the cremation pyre, all the while chanting the Lord's name. After the body is laid on the funeral pyre, ghee is poured over it and the fire kindled by the nearest relative. Sesame seeds are also sprinkled onto the fire as a form of puja. The latter two steps are obviously not possible where an electrical is used for cremation. The fire lighted in the Vivaha ceremony was later by tradition taken to the house and kept kindled in an altar throughout life. This signified that married life was to be lived through life's vicissitudes together. When one of the spouse died, the Agni fire was taken in a crucible or pot to the crematorium, where it was used to light the pyre. This symbolized the end of Vivaha and the beginning of Agni Antyeshti Sanskar. The ritual and observances which then follow vary in different groups and parts of India. By cremation, the body's 5 basic components known as Panch Bhut, Prithvi, that is earth, Jal, that is water, Tej, that is fire, Vayu, wind, and Akash, that is space, are returned to those of the universe, thus maintaining the cosmic equilibrium. The next step is the Asthi Sanchayan. After cremation, the ashes and the residual bones, that is Asthi, are collected in an urn. In some communities, it is customary to wash them with milk and sanctified water. The urn is then taken to the sacrificed rivers such as Ganges, Narmada, or to the sacred confluence of the 3 rivers, that is Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati in Allahabad, known as Triveni Sangam. During the ritual, a Brahmin priest utters Vedic mantras and performs the final rites for the salvation of the deceased. The ashes are then sprinkled into the river. Let's talk about the days of mourning, which are special in itself. Death is a period of major emotional trauma. A time being a very great healer, the rishis have once again prescribed a period of 10 to 30 days of mourning and grieving. The length of the grieving process varies from community to community. However, what is important is that it is given a channel, it is allowed and encouraged. According to the scriptures, the period of mourning lasts for 10 days in case of Brahmins and 40 days in case of non-Brahmins. The reason being that the Brahmins are supposed to be more spiritually aware of the process of death and rebirth, and being less attached require a shorter period to overcome their loss. If one cannot take 10 days off from work, then it is advised to at least take 3 days off and observe the customs of mourning, which are: first, sleeping on the ground; second, abstinent from sex or any kind of recreation; third, not preparing any meals and having only vegetarian food; fourth, abstaining from visiting or entertaining guests; and the last, refraining from shaving or cutting hair or nails. The family is also exempt from all religious duties other than those prescribed for the posthumous rites, and all these are designed to saturate the family members in their thoughts of the deceased, to give them space to resolve all their unexpressed conflicts and feelings. The next aspect which is important in the death rites is the Sutak or the Ashauch. This is also a period of 10 to 13 days which we have just talked about, during which the nearest family members do not perform their personal daily rituals such as puja, arti and thal. Their personal puja is given to a friend to perform on their behalf, though the family members can visit the mandir for darshan. During this period, religious scriptures and devotional songs are recited and sung respectively for the attainment of moksha by the deceased. On either the 11th, 12th or 13th day, the relatives offer food to the Lord in the local mandir to repay the Pitru debt. The general Hindu belief is that as soon as the soul leaves the body, it adopts another body whose limbs grow day by day. On the 10th day after death, this interim body grows completely. The son of the deceased offered the pindas, the pins, food balls made from wheat flour and water to the growing limbs, either day to day or all 10 together on the 10th day. It is believed that up to this day, the deceased still continues his relation up to the world, with this world. Therefore, the deceased is termed preta, which means one who has departed but who has not yet reached the other world. On the 11th day, Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra and Yama are invoked, with Vishnu as a special witness. In their presence, the deceased is offered pindas. On the 12th day, the departed soul is given away to the other world, where he then resides with his preta body. On the 12th day, the departed soul is given away to the other world, where he then resides with his forefathers. As soon as he reaches the other world, he is released from the preta body. The relatives are then freed from the sutak and can then perform their daily puja. These rites are also samskaras on the soul to lead it to God. An associated rite after cremation, generally practiced in India, is for one or more male members of the deceased to shave their heads. This brings us to the last aspect of the death ceremony, which is Shraddha. Among the Hindus, the Shraddha is a religious ceremony, often performed annually in propitiation of their departed ancestors, who are technically known as Pitrus. The word Shraddha, according to sage Pulasya, is derived as follows: Shraddhya diyate yasmat, that which is performed with great faith. The faith referred to here is the faith in the Vedas, whose dictates are taken as incontrovertible and which enjoin its performance as a duty. Among the important items of Shraddha are the Arghya, Havan, the feeding of the Brahmins, the Pinddan, the Vikra, Dakshina, offering and Tarpana. Holy Brahmins are fed in a worshipful manner after invoking on them the souls of the departed ancestors of 3 generations identified with Vasu, Rudra and Aditya on the paternal or maternal side, as the case may be. The Pitrus who live in Pitraloka in the form of spirits are fetched into the Shraddha venue by the Vishvadevas or the universal soul. We also need to understand what is the rationale for Shraddha. A question often asked about Shraddha as we perform it today is this: how by feeding some Brahmins here and now one expect to feed one's ancestors who are dead long since and possibly, according to karma theory, live in another forms and climes? The answer to this question is given in the Matsya Purana. What we do in our Shraddha is to invoke the souls of the departed ancestors on the holy Brahmins invited, and the former are conducted to the venue of the Shraddha by Vishvavedas or the universal spirit. Thus, for practical purposes, the spiritual bodies or souls of our ancestors identified with the Vasu, Rudra and Adityas, who are the Shraddha deities, are present and we worship them. Now, the food the Brahmin eat or the oblations one offers in the sacrificial fire, uttering the departed names and gotra during the Shraddha, is transformed by the mantra and faith into food appropriate for current bodies of the departed souls. And this food is carried to them by celestial messengers, Agni, the god of fire, or the Vasu, Rudras, etc., who have access everywhere and gratify the Pitrus. If, for instance, the ancestor had been born as an angel, the oblation goes to him as nectar. If he is born as a cattle, it is taken to him as grass, or if born as human, it goes to him as cereals, etc. Just as a calf finds its own mother from the many cows grazing, so the mantras uttered in the Shraddh ceremony carry the food to the correct Pitrus. The Pitru Devtas, after completion of the Shraddh and gratified by the worship, bless the performer with health, wealth, children and prosperity and depart to their own region. It has been pointed out by Smriti writers that failure on the part of the descendant to perform the Shraddh rite will invite the wrath of departed souls. Whatever the religious merit or otherwise of Shraddh, it has the psychological merit, namely, it definitely helps us recall with affection and gratitude the memory of our elders and benefactors, which is an ennobling experience. Other than the regular death rituals, there are separate rituals for unnatural deaths, small children, pregnant women and accidental deaths. This brings us to the summary of this chapter. Hindu sanskars form an integral part of Hindu life. Today, with the encroachment of modern living, especially in urban India, only a few of them have survived. The most prominent among them being Vivah and Antyeshti. According to Manu, marriage has been classified into morally approved, prashasta, and morally disapproved marriages, that is aprashasta. The marriage sacrament also includes a number of rituals and ceremonies, which we have just studied. Death sanskars are based on the Hindu belief of immortality of soul and rebirth. Thus, death is not seen as an end, but an intermediary stage in the journey towards self-realization and oneness with divinity. The death sanskars involve Antyeshti or funeral rites, Asthi Sanchan, a short and Shraddh ceremony. The two sanskars can determine the cohesion and perpetuation of Hindu traditions anywhere in the world, if observed sincerely with its pristine and lofty sentiments. The marriage and death sanskars, with their spiritual import, holistically sanskarize all aspects of an individual's life. The sanskars bring together family members, close relatives and friends, hence increase the cohesiveness of the family unit. Therein, the unit harmonizes and strengthens the social structure. The consequence of this is a healthy society with a very strong cultural identity, which easily refines, boosts and perpetuates its traditional beliefs, customs, morals and values. I hope this knowledge is useful for you and interesting also. Thank you so much.